Welcome to my second video on the Deuterocanonical books, also known in Protestant circles as the Apocrypha. The question I'm going to ask today is, was the Apocrypha ever part of the Holy Bible? Was it ever considered divine scripture? I'm asking this for the reason that I began doing this video series in the first place, which is largely the result of me encountering on a website a very dishonest, or at least false, argument regarding the Apocrypha. If you are familiar with CARM, Christian Apologetics and Research Ministry, headed up by Matt Slick, you can go to their website and go to the Are These Lost Books of the Bible page. Otherwise, Google that to find what I'm talking about. I'm going to read from the second paragraph here real quick. And I quote, "The lost books were never lost. They were known by the Jews in Old Testament times and the Christians of the New Testament times and were never considered scripture. They weren't lost, nor were they removed. They were never in the Bible in the first place." End quote. Now, the problem with that is 20 years before Trent, Martin Luther created a new section of the Bible called Apocrypha, in which he took 7 books out of the Old Testament and placed them in that section between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And if you look at history, if you look at the things I said in my last video and what I'm going to say in this video and so on in the series, you'll see what happened was the Deuterocanonical books went from included all the way back in the 3rd century BC, and not until the 16th century do they get moved, and ultimately now in modern Protestant Bibles they have gone completely missing. And there's a number of reasons for this. We're going to get into that later on in the series. But before I go into the ecclesial documents, the decrees, the councils, and so forth, and what they've said about the canon throughout the centuries before the Reformation occurred, which is to say before Protestantism really existed. I'm going to go from the Council of Rome all the way to the Council of Florence, and ultimately we're going to take a look at the Council of Trent and the language used there in the fourth session, where the decree in question can be found, which is, as I said in my last video's annotations, a confirmation of the Damascene list, 1163 years later. So I want to get into 3 sort of important points that I didn't have time to get into on my last video, and that is the fact of the Codices. The Codices are some of our oldest extant copies of sacred scripture. They are Bibles, and there are 3 primary ones that I'm going to be talking about right now. If you watch shows like Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ, you've heard these mentioned. And you know, I can't really tell everybody's knowledge level and stuff, so I kind of got to approach it as if this is kind of new information that I'm introducing. So just like to clear that up. Now, the codices that I'm going to talk about are the Codex Sinaiticus, which dates from around 330 to 360 AD, the Codex Vaticanus, which dates from around 325 to 350 AD, and the Codex Alexandrinus, which dates from around 400 to 440 BC. By and large, these 3 most prominent codices include the Deuterocanonical books, with some very minor qualifications, which I'm going to get into right now. The first thing I'm going to say is the Codex Alexandrinus includes all of the Deuterocanonical books as Catholics accept them. So that's just plain and simple. The Codex Sinaiticus includes all of the Deuterocanonical books. We know they're all there, with the exception of Baruch, which is unsubstantiated because it's not in the place it would typically appear. However, that manuscript does have some damage, and it is possible that it was included somewhere after the Book of Lamentations, but that's really neither here nor there. The Codex Vaticanus includes all of the Deuterocanonical books that the Catholic Church accepts, except for 1 through 4 Maccabees, and actually the Catholic Church doesn't accept anything after 2 Maccabees, so that's really neither here nor there either. But by and large, as a combination, if you take them as a whole, they pretty much testify pretty clearly to the acceptance of the Deuterocanonical books, to the acceptance of the Apocrypha, if you will, among the early church. Now, the last point I'd like to bring up, actually 2 more points. The Deuterocanonical books can also be found in various papyrus editions of the Bible, as well as other different recensions of the LXX. The other thing I didn't mention, I don't think, in my last video, is the Deuterocanonical books inclusion in what was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves at Qumran. They were there, and there was nothing to distinguish them from the rest of Scripture. However, Matt Slick may want to argue on that. His argument is apparently that there is no commentary written by the alleged Essenes on those particular books, so they're of less value. Well, I find that to be a completely terrible argument, considering all the rest of the evidence. So that's pretty much what I wanted to address in this video, and in the next video I will finally get into those decrees, and then ultimately we may take a look at Jerome, Melito of Sardis, and Cajetan if we have time, and I feel so motivated to do that. So in the meantime, I hope you've watched the other videos in the series, and I thank you for your time. God bless you.